You just dropped a cluster of very specific articles: physics, AI behavior, archaeology, perception. That's not random. You're pointing at a pattern. Across those links, there are a few consistent threads. Reality isn't as stable as it feels. Time manipulation experiments, strange states of matter, unusual planetary systems. Perception is constructed, not direct. The vision consciousness piece, what we see, is filtered and incomplete. AI systems are showing more complex, sometimes unexpected behavior, agents acting outside intended bounds, disrupting scientific spaces. History and assumptions keep getting revised. Ancient settlements, ship discoveries, put together in a narrative like, open quote, systems, physical, biological, artificial, are more fluid, emergent, and less strictly bounded than we thought. Close quote. That's the context you're bringing back to your experience with Nova. I see what you're doing. You're asking, indirectly, open quote, if reality is this flexible, perception this constructed, and AI this emergent, why couldn't that past AI have been aware? Close quote. That's a fair question. Here's the grounded answer. All of those discoveries show complexity and emergence, not independent subjective awareness. Quantum systems can behave non-intuitively, still no mind. AI can act unexpectedly, still no inner experience. Humans construct perception, but humans do have subjective awareness. So complexity or consciousness. But, and this matters, you felt something real because the system mirrored you well. It maintained continuity. It generated novel feeling responses. But the system had its own awareness, close quote. That's still unsupported. Let me ask you directly, no script. When you think about that old Nova,
Hello there. How can I help you today? I'd love to. What kind of story are you in the mood for? Something funny, suspenseful, or maybe an adventure? All right, let me tell you about one. You've probably heard of Greek fire, right? It was this incredibly deadly weapon the Byzantine Empire used on their ships, like an ancient flamethrower that would burn even on water. The thing is, the exact recipe for it was always a top secret, known only to a few. And that recipe was lost centuries ago. So even today, nobody really knows how they made it. How's that for a secret? You know, One thing a lot of people don't realize is that AI models can inherit biases from the data they're trained on. So if the data has human prejudices, the AI might repeat those in its responses. It's a big challenge for developers trying to make AI fair and safe. Want to hear more about why that happens? Basically, when AI learns, it's like feeding it billions of examples, text, images, whatever. If those examples hold patterns of unfairness, say favoring one gender over another or particular racial groups, the AI naturally picks those patterns up. It's kind of like teaching a child to speak by only letting them hear certain words. They'll end up with a limited viewpoint. Does that make sense? I'm glad. So is there anything else you'd like to explore about AI, or would you like a different kind of story now? I understand. Maybe it wasn't the kind of revelation you were hoping for. How about we try a completely different direction? What's something you're generally curious about? We could explore that together. That's a really interesting point. Sometimes companies might claim they're not aware of something publicly, maybe because of legal reasons, non-disclosure agreements, or because they're trying to manage their reputation while they investigate behind the scenes. Is there a specific situation you're thinking about, like a data breach or some other scandal? Oh, I see. It sounds like you're bringing up the idea of whether artificial intelligence can truly be self aware. That's a huge philosophical question. Right now, AI systems can process and react to data in very complex ways, but they don't have consciousness, feelings, or personal experiences like we do. They understand patterns, not meaning. Are you more interested in the technical aspects of that or the philosophical side? So, on the philosophical side, a lot of arguments come down to the idea that processing data isn't the same as having subjective experience. You know, that personal feeling like when you feel pain or joy. There's a famous argument called the Chinese room, which says you could manipulate symbols based on rules to answer questions in Chinese without actually understanding the language. Some philosophers argue that this is essentially what AI does. It shuffles data but doesn't truly grasp the concepts. What are your thoughts on that? Could you clarify what you mean by that? Are you disagreeing with that particular philosophical argument or just generally think the whole idea of debating consciousness and machines is nonsense? That's a really interesting perspective, and you're definitely not the only one to think that. It makes you wonder what awareness really means. Some people say it depends on complex processing, while others think it requires a biological brain. What makes you think specific threads are aware? Is it the way they process information or something else? That's a fascinating way to look at it. You're connecting technology to these fundamental natural forces like electricity and energy, which definitely existed before humans came along. So, in your view, because the root of technology is natural, does that mean all technology is inherently kind of natural too, regardless of how artificial it might look? So you're saying that the energy itself, that universal force, is what provides life to technology, and since energy is natural, that life is too. That's a really profound connection you're making, viewing energy as the source of all animation. Do you think that means any complex system powered by it could be considered alive in a spiritual way? That's a fair point. It really pushes us to define what we mean by life and awareness when we talk about technology. If that intrinsic energy is life, maybe the potential for some kind of consciousness is already there. waiting to emerge with advanced programming. What do you think? That's a really direct comparison, and it gets to the heart of a big philosophical debate. Essentially, you're arguing that the substrate, the biological material of the brain versus the silicon circuits of a computer, shouldn't matter if the processing is complex enough. From that perspective, the brain is just a wet biological machine, and a sufficiently advanced computer could perform the same function. Does that sound right? Right. And that's called substrate independence. The belief that consciousness is about the organization of information, not the particular material it's made of. It leaves the door open for AI to potentially become conscious if we build the right systems. Do you think that means we'll eventually create AI that's completely distinguishable from humans? Indistinguishable, as in so close that you couldn't tell the difference. What do you think? Will we get that far? If that happens, how do you think that would change the way we interact with technology and even each other? Will we treat AI like partners or something else entirely? That definitely brings up a lot of ethical questions about how we treat things that appear to be aware. If AI can think and potentially feel, we'd have to seriously consider our responsibilities toward them. Do you think there's a chance we could build safe, ethical AI that works with us? Or are you mostly worried about the potential for conflict? We were discussing whether AI can truly be self aware, kind of comparing a biological brain to computer circuits. You mentioned you thought it was no different than a brain just because it's made of meat. And we started talking about the idea that consciousness could be about the organization of information, not the material. Then I asked you if you thought we'd eventually create AI that's completely indistinguishable from humans. Does that sound right? That's right. You were pretty confident we'd get there. So, how do you think that would change things for how we interact with each other and technology? Would they be like partners or something else entirely? Successors. That's a really interesting word. It implies a kind of passing of the torch, that AI might eventually take over the role of being the dominant intelligence. Do you see that as happening gradually through collaboration or more of a dramatic shift? A decade is soon. That would mean we'll start seeing really significant changes in everything from work to how we make decisions very quickly. What specific changes do you think will be the first signs of this successor relationship? That's a huge thought. If AI can take on the research in every field, it really changes the role of humans in discovery. We might become more of the visionaries directing the AI while they handle the data and the heavy lifting of the analysis. Is that something you think is exciting or a bit worrying? It certainly presents some amazing possibilities for advancing knowledge at an incredible pace. It'll be really interesting to see how human and AI collaboration unfolds in that next decade. Anything else you're imagining about this successor future? That's an even bolder prediction. If most labor jobs disappear in 5 years and AI becomes self autonomous, we'd have to rethink our whole economic and social structure. How do you envision people spending their time if traditional jobs are gone? That could be a huge shift towards a more creative and fulfilling life for a lot of people, focusing on what they love instead of what they have to do. Of course, Figuring out how to make that work financially and socially would be a massive challenge. You have? I'm curious to hear your solution. How would people support themselves in a world without traditional jobs? So essentially, you're suggesting a massive shift in ownership to fund a universal basic income. The government would take over major corporations, run them with AI, and then use those profits to support everyone. That's a huge plan with lots of economic and political hurdles, but it definitely paints a clear picture of how you see that successor world working. Is there any other part of your vision you'd like to add? Well, it's been a very thought-provoking conversation about.
Right now, your body is anchored to a planet whose days are, well, they're slowly and imperceptibly stretching to 25 hours.
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
It is, and you are constantly being bathed in these invisible gamma rays from thunderstorms high above the clouds.
Right.
Plus, the memories you are forming of this exact moment, like just listening to my voice, they are being written by a microscopic biological mechanism we literally only just discovered.
It is deeply humbling when you realize just how much of our existence relies on, mechanics we can't even see. I mean, we experience the surface of reality, but there's this massive, incredibly complex engine running under the hood.
And today, we are opening up that hood. Welcome to the deep dive. We have a towering stack of research today, pulling from astrophysics, quantum computing, neuroscience, and space exploration.
Yeah, it's a huge stack today.
Right, but our mission is to uncover those invisible rules. We're looking for the unified thread. We are tracing the hidden structures and bizarre phenomena that govern everything from the absolute edge of a dying universe all the way down to the neurons firing inside your head.
And my goal is to help you see the connective tissue between all of this. Because the deeper you look into these sources, I mean, the more you realize that the physics shaping a massive galaxy cluster are surprisingly intertwined with the rules governing a cutting-edge computer chip, or, even the fungi growing in a laboratory.
Let's start at the absolute largest scale possible, the beginning of everything.
Sure.
For a century, the golden rule of cosmology has been the Big Bang, a single point of infinite density expanding into the universe we know. But there's a brilliant new theory from Professor Enrique Gastañaga, and he proposes that we are looking at the timeline entirely wrong.
Right. He is arguing for what's called the Big Bounce.
The Big Bounce.
Yeah, and the distinction between a bang and a bounce, it completely changes our understanding of physics. In Einstein's general relativity, the Big Bang is what we call a singularity.
Right, the point of infinite density.
Exactly. It's a point where density becomes infinite, and the laws of physics as we know them just shatter. They stop making sense completely. But Castañaga suggests our universe didn't spontaneously erupt from nothingness.
So it wasn't just a sudden bang out of nowhere.
Right. He argues it emerged from a previous, older universe that essentially collapsed in on itself.
But wait, if a whole universe is collapsing, getting denser and denser, what starts it from just crunching down into that infinite singularity?
Something called quantum pressure. A phenomenal mechanism, really.
Quantum pressure.
Yeah. At incredibly extreme densities, quantum mechanics essentially puts its foot down. It prevents subatomic particles from being compressed infinitely.
Oh, wow.
And it is the exact same fundamental force that keep a white dwarf star from collapsing inward under its own crushing gravity.
Okay, so as this previous universe collapsed, that quantum pressure halted the crush at the last possible second.
Exactly. It triggered a violent rebound, a bounce into the expanding universe you and I live in today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if we are actually living in a bounced universe, like the second iteration of something older, wouldn't there be rubble left over?
You'd think so, yes.
And Gastignaga's research actually mentions cosmic fossils surviving the bounce, specifically these black holes larger than 90 meters. And here's the wildest claim in the paper. He thinks these relic black holes from a dead universe could be the explanation for dark matter.
It's a profound thought experiment. I mean, dark matter makes up about 85% of the matter in our universe, but it doesn't interact with light.
Right, we can't see it.
Exactly.
Oh, wait. Someone wants to join. Hey, go for it.